10 afternoon. We call the meeting to order. Special meeting for the Municipal Board of Ethics. Call it to order. Can we do the roll call, please, Lisa?
Ted Carlson is excused. Terrence Kelly.
Here.
David Nesbitt.
Here.
Keith Silver.
Here.
Steve Strom.
Here.
Also present are Dee Ennis, Deputy Municipal Attorney, and Glenda Regnard, Administrative Hearing Officer. We have a quorum.
Thank you. In front of you is the, you actually have the minutes?
No minutes because
Okay,
this is a
it's
special
on my
meeting.
agenda. Any appearance requests?
Are you going to approve the agenda?
Oh, I already did. Do you have a motion to approve the agenda? It's been moved and seconded.
Second.
Any opposed? Hearing none, move, the agenda's approved.
This is nice. I've been doing so many motions and seconds. This way I
It's
can
nice to
Terry.
carry.
Yeah, it's nice for Terry to come and carry that load. I've been doing a lot of talking recently.
I've got to get going. So,
Oh, yeah, I figured it's about time, isn't it?
Moving along, there's no appearance requests or special orders, and no new business that we know, but we do have 8 unfinished business. And under 8A, political activity, what constitutes material that is partisan in nature, and Glenda did I thought, a very, very nice memo. It was, I told her it was readable for us non-lawyers even, so,
And can I?
go ahead, be my guest.
Terry, how this came to be was Dick Trainey asked Julia for advice, and who then came to me, and I went to Glenda about whether a resolution in support, having the assembly.
yeah, I read the
Okay,
resolution.
read that,
Yeah,
okay.
read-
Okay, you got the resolution, okay.
Right.
And since Glenda has written her memo, and we did give that back to Julia, Julia and on Dick's behalf came back again and said, please think this through more. If you put a bunch of, I think really a lot of, if it has a lot of municipal impact, and if the resolution was more carefully crafted, would that meet some of your concerns? And I don't know, actually, I probably should make a copy of that email, but that was the gist of it. Is,
Can this be modified slightly to?
yeah, can we, and so with that thought in mind, I asked another person at my law, at the Department of Law to draft another resolution that was more carefully tailored. Now, this is not my recommendation that this, but at least, it seemed to me the resolution before the Ethics Board, although you'll review it, I had my doubts that the Ethics Board would say that that's not political. So I said, well, let's not waste too much time there. Let's try to get one that seems to be more within the guidelines and see what you would think of that. And that might even spark your conversation to a greater degree, to more detail. And so I did draft that.
Have you seen this?
No, in fact, hot off the press. So can I pass this around?
Be my guest.
Okay.
We had a request by Facility Training for a formal advisory.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, so now he's
So that's-
turned this into a formal.
Right, so that's the action that would now come before
But I said instead of debating this in a vacuum, given that the first resolution said don't vote for marijuana, it's bad for you, and didn't tie it to municipal at all. So this is a draft.
I'm confused on your draft. Down at line 21 and line 26 seems to argue against.
Can we? You mind if I just
Okay.
take a quick look at this really quick, and then we can.
And I will say that Mr. Trainee hasn't seen, I mean, I sent this to him, but I didn't get any comments back.
This is, in my recollection, maybe the third, if not the fourth time we voted on legalization of marijuana in the state.
I know we have a couple of times.
And it has failed in those times, and I don't want to get into the politics of that, but it has. And I do see the difference in reading this versus this, because this one here says, make yourself informed, as opposed to, on the bottom of this one, it says opposes the measure. I think this takes a lot of, and I know Glenda hasn't had a chance to review it yet, but it takes a lot of the politics out of that, because her memo, I didn't realize the numbers that she researched with respect to how partisan in nature that particular, that was.
Well, what this does is, obviously, is it eliminates the directive to the populace to vote in a certain way. So it says be informed instead of vote in a particular way. But is that enough? And I guess at a certain point, is this a gray area where the board's judgment says, hey, we think this is neutral enough, or is that what we're looking for, neutrality? Certainly, probably telling people to vote in a certain manner seemed like that wasn't, that didn't fall within Glenda's research.
Do you have any thoughts? I mean, I'm referring to you because you are kind of a resident expert
On marijuana?
on the,
On marijuana?
No,
What do you mean by that?
on the research part of it.
Sure.
So, what are your thoughts on this?
So, from my research and from the way that we have to live within the confines of the way the code is currently drafted. We all pretty much agree on that. And the way the code is drafted, and it says that these individuals cannot engage, they can't publish, disseminate, advertise. They can't engage in or disseminate material that's partisan in nature. Partisan is not defined anywhere in the code, so we have to go with a really broad, just a generic definition of partisan. So in order for material to pass muster, it has to then be non-partisan or bipartisan. It just can't be partisan. So whatever this document is that's before us has to be a document that is not partisan in nature. So on this one,
Can I ask you a quick question about that?
Sure.
The partisan, there was a discussion in your memo, and like Republican versus Democrat.
Mhm.
Does it need to be Republican versus Democrat, or can it simply be argumentative?
Right, so
Right.
when partisan, so the partisan doesn't, I think to most individuals, they immediately think Republican or Democrat. But the true definition of partisan is much broader than that.
That's- okay.
And that's where this really began
That's what I
to
thought.
get very gray very quickly.
Mhm.
Now, on marijuana, on the legalization of marijuana topic, that's really very clearly partisan. I mean, across the country, supporting it or opposing it falls really squarely along traditional party lines.
Yeah.
There are other areas, though, that, other topics I think you could get into that are politically charged topics, that are really sensitive topics, that may not necessarily fall along party lines, but still would be considered partisan because it gets into advocacy.
Mhm.
And that's where those two words, which I know the board has addressed advocacy before, those begin to sort of start to butt up next to each other. So, from my perspective, if what an assemblyman or an elected official or an individual is advocating is something that is essentially not representative of the whole, then I think you're getting into something that's partisan. The real easy fix for this would be to craft a definition of partisan and plug it in the code and define it how you want it. Define it in terms that are easier to manipulate. Because right now, it's so broad that a lot of stuff's appears to be coming under it. It may not have been the intent originally.
I'd like to add that to the agenda next time and put it under Glenda homework.
Thank you.
I'm kidding.
Proper definition
I'm
of
kidding.
partisan.
I'm
Don't
kidding.
discourage her. She's doing so good.
I know,
But I think that's
success.
really where we're bogging down, is that we've stepped into an area that we don't have guidance, there's no definition, there's no area within which we have to operate. And so you get tagged with this really broad definition. And so here we are, the only resolution that I reviewed was the one that came to me from Trainee's office, the proposed one,
Mhm.
which to me, was, in my opinion, there was no question about
That was
it.
very
It was an
clear.
urge, it was asking voters to defeat something. It was an absolute call to action, to take a stand, to take a particular position on a piece of legislation.
Can I make a comment there, though? That it kind of goes contrary to the data that you provided nationally.
The
If you
resolution?
look, if you look at who was advocating for the resolution, and then you compare it to the national data that says, one partisan group thinks this way, the other one thinks this way. You could argue that the person presenting it is.
Has been a filed Republican.
Yeah, but what you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To me, it's opposite from the data that you put in the argument anyway. I'm
But
just,
are you
I'm
talking
just
about-
making that observation.
Are you talking about training?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, that's,
He didn't draft this.
he didn't draft. No, and technically the assembly's part,
I know
we just know that
technically.
based on our
Yeah, I know
our
but
knowledge of our
but
local,
just based on
right.
to me it's opposite from the data argument
Mm.
in this one case. I'm not saying I agree with it or disagree with it. I'm just saying it's opposite.
I wonder, this might not be satisfactory, but certainly what the Assembly would certainly do is introduce even the original resolution in an Assembly meeting and pass it, right? Because the prohibition is not on the Assembly, the prohibition would be on city employees then subsequently publishing or disseminating the materials, right? So
Are
as
you thinking, Terry, that it doesn't apply to elected officials?
Well, remember, it only applies to elected officials through the back door.
To the back
right?
door,
You know,
right.
So,
But so-
what would city employees be asked to do in order to publish or disseminate the material?
That's what you're saying. But
So-
haven't we reached the conclusion that because of the back door, it does apply to elected officials? So already there, I thought.
Well, if city employees would be asked, so if at an assembly meeting, if an assembly member introduces the resolution and they pass it, that in and of itself doesn't seem to me to require city employees. Remember, in the other case we were dealing with, we had decided there was no way what had been done could have been done without other departments and other city employees having to get involved, and that was sort of the way the back door wound up.
Okay,
in
but
that case.
Terry, I thought your opinion in that case said basically, and we're going to look at a scrubbed down version again today, so I'm gonna go ahead and say this, that because it didn't say the mayor in that first section, that you didn't have to rely on the backdoor approach, but in general, the ethics board was going to interpret that backdoor provision as indicating that everybody else is responsible, does get caught into that first group of prohibitions. So the elected officials, this would apply to elected officials regardless of employees. And that's a very big difference. I wanna make sure we're on
The
track.
big difference in this case, in that case, we were talking about paid advertisements, right? And in this case, we're talking about, there's something that just doesn't sit right about saying to the assembly, you may not pass a resolution as the elected body of the municipality of Anchorage, right? So it seems to me like buying an advertisement,
Using municipal
once
funds.
an advertisement is different in kind from an elected body from making a resolution. Particularly if you took out the part of we urge voters, but just if we said, this is the assembly's view, our view is the, legalization of marijuana would be bad for Alaska.
So,
It
But
doesn't
that's the
sit clear.
difference between under .025, that political activity that's prohibited, A, is what grabs the spending municipal funds, and then
Right.
subsection E is where we're landing, which is campaigning, preparing, publishing, broadcasting, or distributing by any means material of a partisan nature on any ballot measure.
Yeah, that's right, and so that's why I say that, now remember, E applies to municipal employees, not directly to the assembly. So where it would get triggered is if the assembly passed it, and this is where, I mean, it might not be satisfactory for the assembly. It certainly would be triggered if the assembly passes at a meeting, and then it instructs Lisa or someone, now put this up on the website.
But that would be the normal course of her.
Well, that's right, and then so that would be,
Right,
I mean, that
that's
would,
right.
that's when it would get triggered. Could they at a meeting propose it and pass it and let the news media cover it and all that kind of stuff?
But
Of
I
course,
think
of
it
course
does
they
apply
could.
to them as electeds, the same that what Dee was saying. Under under .035M, that's where electeds are still bound by the provisions under .025. So they're held,
Well-
everybody's held to the same thing.
So Terry,
Well,
Terry-
it's to knowingly permit, right?
Right.
And so,
So wouldn't publish?
and doesn't 035 explicitly exclude them?
Are you saying that passing a resolution as an assembly is not a political activity?
It wouldn't be.
It's not.
It
right?
wouldn't be, I mean, look, that in and of itself, it seems to me, would not involve the publishing or distribution of partisan material.
But it's
It's
also,
a resolution that we propose at an assembly meeting, the assembly passes it, let's suppose they pass it.
Yeah, but the news shows up, is that not
But the
publishing?
resolution itself is
I mean-
partisan material.
yeah, but
And
it's.
that's where it came.
But it's
See, but-
passing a
but see, but that-
resolution,
that-
what's the definition of a political activity?
Well, that's not the case either.
So is the passing of a resolution in an assembly meeting a political activity?
Well, political activities, I mean, the code can't be interpreted to prevent
Well, but
the
the
elected
way you
body
read that, though,
to not
it's the
engage in
sub-
political activity, right?
But I guess
Right.
my argument is the work of the assembly actually a political activity? If they're all apolitical?
Oh, you mean partisan?
Well, the subparagraph starts off and talks about political activity.
Right, that's the caption.
Right.
Right, and
So-
it gets into the descriptor of
So,
partisan material.
so my question is passing a resolution considered a political activity? And if it's not, then it.
If the material, if the resolution is partisan, yes. And
If
that's
it-
where,
If it requires the publication, distribution, or dissemination of partisan material, so
That's what makes something a political activity?
that's what the code forbids.
Yeah.
So another,
But
because
the-
otherwise, I mean,
but
think,
the
because
code-
otherwise, if you said you could not even engage in, simply because the news was gonna cover it, then the mayor and assembly person could never offer any kind of political opinion.
But the code only prohibits the distribution, publication, blah, 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 if it's a political activity. So
If it's partisan.
Well, the subparagraph says political activity. My question is what they do as an assembly considered a political activity? Or is a political activity campaigning?
Yeah, right. No, so remember that the backdoor is that they can't engage, they can't allow political activity that violates
Yeah.
the provisions of 025, and that's the
But
backdoor.
yet-
That kicks you back to
but yet
025.
political activity is
025
not-
doesn't use the word political, the section we're worried about uses the word partisan.
Yeah, but political
And it's the
activity.
dissemination of partisan materials, even partisan activity is okay.
Yeah.
It's the dissemination of partisan materials that's the problem.
Well,
At least as far as the code's
partially, it's also the authorization of money being held by a municipality used to influence the outcome of an election, which is under M4.
But do you think that's happening here? I mean, like, if they
Well, I
bought
mean,
a
but-
commercial, if the assembly authorized to buy commercial time in which they made commercials against legalization of marijuana, that would be a violation of that.
Well,
But is passing a resolution and maybe putting the resolution on the website, which I presume is all they would be planning on doing.
is that still not spending municipal funds?
I bet I could go.
Oh, it's authorized municipal funds though, right? So,
Well, by passing a resolution, aren't they tacitly authorizing the clerk to post the results and post the resolution?
I would argue that's a sunk cost, that it's whatever they do is gonna be posted anyway.
Because you're gonna get paid anyways, right?
Yeah. So,
Currently, we're not posting anything on the website. We've only got, we've got everything up to 2008,
But
but
somebody-
we make it available to the public and it's posted within the municipal G
oh,
Drive.
so you're 6 years behind, so we really don't have to
Yeah,
worry
so,
about this until we
you
get,
know,
we'll get a complaint.
6 years from now, we might get a complaint, so.
Are you serious? You're not posting stuff
No.
on the web? So if the assembly passed this resolution,
It would not
would
be
it
posted on the
involve any
website.
Once it's
Okay, so
passed,
I
does
made
it
an
involve
assumption
any
that I was
work
wrong.
on for any municipal employee in terms of
I-
posting it somewhere?
I
handing
put it
out
on the
somewhere?
municipal G Drive. So it's
But-
accessible to municipal people,
But
but
this-
not on the website.
The assembly meeting minutes are posted on the website, right?
No,
For people to view? No?
no, not
There's no way
currently.
for, as a citizen, to go get it? You have to
You
come
have
in
to
and
call
ask
the
for it?
office.
Oh, wow.
And we
So
actually,
why, but our minutes and our tape recordings are on the website,
yeah.
right? But the assembly doesn't do that.
But not your minutes, your recordings. Okay, the recordings are on the website,
Okay.
not the minutes.
Okay.
So,
So it is published.
But as minutes, right? As the
Yeah.
whole minutes of the meeting. It's
Yeah.
not pulled out and then
Right.
offered as here's of this particular.
Yeah.
well, not even as
material.
the minutes, just as a recording.
Just as
Of
a
the whole
whole.
meeting.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So you would hear a discussion on it, and you'd hear a vote on it. So,
Actually,
mean,
I
this-
wasn't aware that, you know, how, because I don't go through and look at the center's website, so.
I think we also, did we add define partisan to the next meeting, or were you just joking?
He was just
He
joking.
was joking, but I think Steve really wants to.
Well, I think we should
Yeah.
also add to that defining what a political activity is. So yeah,
It's gonna depend on the
I
source.
kind of view it as something that would be the course of normal business, and to me, passing resolutions is part of their responsibility.
So, but the whole
Yeah.
gist of it is the big, if there's an opposition to this resolution, as to, would be the last line. Where they're opposing the passage of the initiative to legalize, you know, there's a whole lot of whereases, which you could argue are positive or negative. These whereases just have backup behind it, but they're similar except for the last two or three. If they remove the opposed, you know, if they change that to Assembly urges the voters to become educated on the matter before voting, would it be the same, almost the same wording? Become informed on the issues surrounding ballot measure 2 before casting their vote?
Well, it's better, right? I mean, because it's certainly.
I mean, this one attempts to get some balance.
Right? You have to
Yeah.
look at. I mean, we said in our letter regarding the paid advertising issue that that one of the criteria that we would use is does it present both positive and negative.
Yeah, and this one
facts?
attempts-
Does it
and this one attempts to
avoid
get some
highly
balance,
speculative
yeah.
predictions, and there it's very the language is exceptionally guarded, right? It seems
Mm-hmm.
to offer both positive and negatives and provide sources to both, and then the predictions are. I noticed that there's a lot of may language. It may do this positively. It may do that negatively. So I think it fits better the spirit of that, of this kind of like even-handed presentation. Now go get informed. I don't know if Dick hasn't seen this. I'm not sure if he would like it.
Yeah, I mean,
it
doesn't-
doesn't.
I don't know if it does anything.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't.
But it does present both sides of the argument and informs, and asks the consumers to become.
Has the state legislature weighed in on this? Have
I
any
honestly
of you
don't know.
seen or heard
I have
anything
not.
out of
I
a
have
state
not heard
representative
I think
weighing
the
in on
governor.
it?
I think the governor has.
Did he?
I think I've heard or maybe somebody just attributed something to him. I can't remember. So would the original resolution be partisan if all the assembly members voted in favor of it?
Well, I don't know that we
Yeah.
get to that point, because the resolution itself, as drafted, is partisan and
But
under
it's-
the, based on the way the code's currently written,
Right.
couldn't even get that far.
Yeah.
But, I don't
But-
think that.
but if they-
Yeah, but I think, no, I mean, I think, yeah, even if it got that far and every member voted and approved it,
Right.
to pass the
It would be
resolution.
bipartisan. You could consider it bipartisan.
No.
In a nonpartisan assembly.
Well, but I guess
Is it still representative of more of the whole when?
they all are in favor of something to me.
No, I
there's-
mean the whole of the municipality.
Well, they were all elected by the whole of the municipality. So,
Or 20%
yeah,
of the
yeah.
eligible
And
voters.
majority of the 20% to vote.
In their district.
Yeah. So maybe we ought to just deal with it out if they present it and vote on it. Then somebody then,
I like it, trap them.
well, not necessarily, but.
Where we are right now is, so we now have a request for
Yeah.
an advisory
Yeah.
opinion. So that's, I guess. that's
When is the hearing?
It's not on yet. The
Okay.
election's in November.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I
I
was,
mean, I don't think it's partisan. if they're
because
all
we
in
also have a
favor.
meeting next week, or
You don't
scheduled
think it's
meeting,
I don't think
right?
it's partisan if they're all in favor of it.
Yeah, I guess though, I think I'm with you, I
But
read
in
partisan
order-
Yeah,
more broadly.
partisan is-
To me, partisan
yeah,
would mean
I-
like if you have, if you have
Yeah.
two sides, at least two sides, and you're taking a particular side
Mhm.
in a controversy.
Yeah, I wouldn't-
I would read it a little bit.
This is kind of an awkward relationship right now. It's like the three of you and I'm sitting over here. Move my
Well,
chair.
yeah, come on over here.
You wanted to, look, you enjoy the benefits being closer to the sandwiches.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I don't think whether the assembly votes one way or the other on it would change the
Partisan nature of it, of the topic.
whether they simply all agree with it.
Yeah.
No, I don't. And this one is certainly less partisan. You could even argue that this new one is right down the middle. I mean, I don't, it just says go get informed.
So if
And
there-
then it has a bunch of links to different websites to go get informed.
So if there wasn't,
But the question to me is more what Terry was talking about is more interesting in a way. Whether it makes any difference, whether they can do it, do either one they want.
Well, yeah. And I was kind of connecting it to, is this actually a political activity? In terms of part of the normal course of business as an assembly?
Seems like it's pretty fine reading though, your interpretation.
It is a pretty.
It's
It's true. Oh, no,
that's
it's-
a-
it is.
that's
It
a-
is almost
that's a-
realistic.
It is. I think that would be a square peg round hole type of a really thin line.
It's tight fit.
Fiction
Square
word.
peg.
You can't get the square peg in the round hole eventually.
It seems like a pretty.
It's thready.
It is
For sure,
thready.
It's a threading.
I think it is.
But I mean, but the intuition I had.
But I understand.
When I read all the stuff, I was like,
Yeah.
Again, at least this is the broad intuition I had. I was like, geez, doesn't it just seem like that the assembly, as the elected body of Anchorage, should be able to pass resolutions? And again, the only thing I found the only thing that gave me heartburn in the original version was the thing we urge voters to. I'm not
Right.
sure that the assembly should be telling voters, but if the assembly says, look, we're your elected officials, we've been thinking about this issue maybe more carefully than you have, and guess what? Here's a lot of facts to consider. We're against this. God, surely the assembly should have the right, and I don't find that offensive. Code aside for a second, I don't find that doesn't strike me as, oh, they're using municipal funds for this, or oh, they're overstepping their bounds as elected officials. This just sort of seems like the kind of thing you would sort of expect elected officials to do, to offer their opinion as to on a burning issue of the day. And so then when I looked back at the code, yes, I looked back at the code, definitely thinking, the code can't quite say that, does it? And maybe it doesn't, right? Admittedly, it's
Yeah,
threading. I mean, because I didn't zone in on partisan. What I originally zoned into was the distribute by any means material of a partisan issue. So it was the material word that got me. It's like, gosh, because I was thinking it would go up on the web. I'm like, geez, is posting a resolution, is that partisan material? I think the intention here of partisan material is like advertisements or campaign flyers or, something, a paid space in a newspaper ad or something like that. Or material that you have prepared, editorials that you've prepared that you're handing out to people. So that a resolution passed in the official capacity of the assembly that then gets put on the website 6 years from now. I think if you were to ask the framers of this code, they would say that this is not necessarily what they had in mind.
Are you aligning yourself with school?
It's
Fascinating.
part of, oh, yeah.
Fascinating.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You never
So
expected that.
if there wasn't a ballot measure in November, would this resolution be a problem?
No.
I mean, obviously in the original resolution, the last line would change, and it might say something about, that the Anchorage Assembly opposes the passage of any future initiative to legalize recreational marijuana.
We
in
could,
Alaska.
we just have to go back 4 or 5 months where they changed the definition because we had issues with synthetic marijuana. And they changed the definition to include the synthetics. I mean, the feeling of the assembly is, you know, to me, this was passed no problem because of what I've watched them do, actually.
Right.
Um,
But so.
Now, how
Well,
does
to
it
answer
affect?
your question,
Yeah.
I think, no, because the language of the code says,
Right.
you know, actively campaign or prepare, which notably, he didn't prepare this.
Right.
He had the foresight to have another individual prepared it.
Yeah.
Publish, broadcast, distribute, you know, which I interpret those terms really broadly, not necessarily formally broadcasting or formally publishing. Or by any means, material of a partisan nature on any ballot measure, which if there's a ballot measure, that's off the hook, including referendums, initiative, bond issues, or other special elections. If you take all of that off the table, then it falls outside the scope of this subsection, and I think you have a different animal on your hands. But this is
But it would still-
specifically in advance of this.
But it
You
would-
know, it's calling on
yeah.
voters to
Right.
vote a specific way.
But it would still be partisan.
It
by
would
ti-
still
by
be
topic.
partisan, but it's not material of a partisan nature on any ballot measure, referendum, initiative. So the rest of the
But they-
prohibition would fall away.
Yeah.
But if the assembly had come out against Proposition 1 and said, we recommend you vote no
Yeah.
on this last election,
Right.
it changes the subject, but it still comes back to the same thing. That was a partisan election.
Right.
And there's another ballot measure in November, right?
Yeah, that's this one here.
No, there's another one besides
There's another
this
one, AO 37. There's
Right.
about 3 or 4 other proposed ballot
And
measures.
so the everyone already knows. I mean, you can quickly go and see how each assembly member supports or doesn't support that ballot measure, and it's on the website, right?
So you asked earlier about the definition of political activity.
Yeah.
There was a definition in the prior version of the code. It's not in there right now, but the prior version, and this is really sort of what I honed in on to keep in line with the spirit of, you know, the prior versions of the code in conjunction with the current code. And that definition stated, political activity is any act for the purpose of influencing the nomination or election of a person, which that's not what we have here,
Right.
to office, or for the purpose of influencing the outcome of any ballot proposition. And as this is written, clearly it's trying to influence the outcome because it's urging voters to oppose it. So if, in the spirit of this, and in conjunction with the partisan definition, if there's a resolution that's drafted that's not an attempt to affect the outcome, if it's informational, which goes in line with your all's prior, definitions and points on advocacy, if it's informational in nature, then I think you've taken it outside the realm of that. But,
So-
I mean, as assembly people, no question, they, like you and I, have First Amendment rights. But when they're in their official capacity, those rights are abrogated. They're scoped a bit, because they speak with a different voice than they do as just John Q. Public. It's just a regular member of the citizenry. So that's, and I know that can be a little bit of a wrestling match internally with a lot of assembly folks is, why can't I say these things? You can say lots of things in your individual capacity that you can't say in your official capacity because of the nature of your code.
So, assuming for the moment that this is informational only, I'm just not gonna get into that part of
Sure.
the debate right now, but assuming this is informational, what you're saying is that this would be okay.
It
This is a
doesn't
revised
appear
one.
to try to affect the
Based on your
outcome of
research. Okay.
in the old code, it doesn't appear to be trying to affect the outcome of a proposition. It doesn't appear to be advocating one side or the other, a proponent for one or the other. And it's certainly not telling voters specifically how to vote. But I do find it interesting, if not telling, that the state legislature, to my knowledge, has not uttered a peep about any of this. And I wonder if it's because.
As a group.
As a group.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's because they floated this and got, on touching something that's politically charged like this. I mean, future issues we could easily see coming down the pipe would be same-sex marriage, state-sponsored immigration. I mean, there's lots of these types of issues
That's
that are
interesting.
sort of in the pipeline.
There's a floodgate issue too. Imagine the assembly issuing their opinion on all kinds of different issues coming up.
Right.
Well, that's what I was trying to think, like, what would be the, the potential, like, slippery slope of
Yeah.
allowing them to do this? And it would be that they could potentially pass a resolution on every ballot measure that's coming forward saying, as the
Right.
Anchorage Assembly, we think this is
Yeah.
a good idea, or we think that's not a good idea.
Vote
Again,
this
does that-
way,
but does
vote
give
that
you-
way.
Does that give you a lot of heartburn that they could do that? I mean, again, what gives me heartburn is paying for advertisements telling the public how to vote. That's not their job, it seems to me. Is it their job to say, hey, as your elected officials, this is what we think is good for the city, good for the state?
Well,
It's
I
like
think
their job, isn't it?
Well, but I think it's a little different on issues like, in your memo, you talked about budget issues or financing or coffers or taxes or those types of things tend to, this is, I mean, my gut feeling is, I don't want them telling me how to vote. Meaning my gut feeling is this is not, now, it's different if they were to say that marijuana is, we've done a study and it's anticipated to cost the city X. It will increase revenue, tax revenues by X. Or some kind of like factual, that to me is different. But if they're just saying, we don't like it, and we don't think you should, and we think you should vote this way, I don't think that's their role.
And I will say, it's the second half of that statement that gave me heartburn about the first draft, that kind of, we urge citizens to vote.
Yeah.
I mean, that probably is not their job. But the first half is saying, this is where we sit on this
Yeah.
issue as your elected body. We think
Sure.
this would be bad for Anchorage.
So if they change the now therefore to be similar to the now therefore of the amendment, of the amended item.
Well, but what Terry is saying is that they can be partisan. Right? I mean, that's basically what you're saying. You're saying they can be partisan, just take out the now therefore to satisfy those who don't.
Or take out what-
But you can't have a
the
resolution
original
without a
version?
therefore.
Whereas I
It's
have.
right,
a
it's right
version.
behind 8A. Yeah.
I mean, like, I would say about the original version, if we just take out the second half of the conjunction, the Anchorage Assembly opposes passage of the initiative to legalize recreational marijuana in OS.
Yeah, I think.
I mean,
Do you think the rest of it's just informational?
I don't think the rest of
Or-
it's different. I think the rest of it's partisan, but
Yeah.
I think
You think it's
it
okay
doesn't
to be partisan?
require the distribution.
Well,
See,
but-
I think those are two different
but,
issues.
But it's all,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
they put we have the sources here, so they could include the sources there. This is really a lot of the same information in the second draft.
Except that this one's more balanced, because if you look at, for an example, this one can bring in tax revenue for the state of Colorado, this one can significant reduction number of arrests, charges for the, so this one is more balanced with respect to, so it's less partisan in my opinion
Well,
than the other one.
you know, my view is that if the Assembly studied this, I'm assuming they have, and they're not just, just voting, with a lack of reading something like sometimes our Congress does. And they oppose it for valid reasons, like if there's a financial implication to the city. I'd like to know that.
It does contain a lot of what I would call conclusory statements in the proposed resolution.
Yeah.
That I don't know what the basis of those conclusions are.
Yeah.
That information has not been submitted.
I kind of agree with Terry, I don't, they should be able to say if they oppose something.
At least that's the feeling that I have.
Yeah.
And then sort of like the loophole that I see that you'll have to see if you guys buy this or not would be that they're not allowed to do partisan stuff in which they're asking city employees or allowing city employees to distribute, publish, or disseminate partisan materials, right? So this is clearly partisan to me, so that's one, but it's gotta be both, right? Now, if it doesn't get published on the website for several years, and that's all that happens anyway, and that's part of your normal course of business, you're not getting paid extra to do that, it seems to me that maybe the publishing dissemination part condition is not being met, and in which case this one would be okay, even as
But does our
partisan as it
regulation
is.
say that it has to be and or?
Well, so here's what it is, right? So what the prohibition is that they are not allowed to knowingly permit and then kick back to 025 an employee to actively campaign or prepare, publish, broadcast, or distribute by any means material of a partisan nature on any ballot measure.
Well,
So is raising a resolution in an assembly meeting and passing it, just stop right there, is that actively campaigning, preparing, publishing, broadcasting, or distributing by any means material of a partisan nature?
How could it not be? What's the point? I mean, why else would they be sitting here voting on this? They want they want the information disseminated. No, I know. As soon as I said want, I knew you were going to jump up there. But the issue is that if they are doing this in open assembly meeting,
Right.
with people sitting there listening, with the TV cameras on,
Right.
how can that not be publishing dissemination of that information?
I think that's it.
Wow. See, I
Do you think that an assembly member during an assembly meeting could not even so much as say in public
They're allowed to
that
debate.
legalization of
They're allowed to
marijuana would be a
debate.
bad idea, but they
Right.
won't even be so much as able to say it? Because
Well-
that will trigger the exact same thing. That'll get covered in the news. It'll be, it'll be on TV. The only difference would be just them as a body saying, this is where we stand.
I think urging the population to vote a certain way is advocacy, but I think
I'd love to
if
see
they're,
that part
if they're
cut out,
stating
but-
their position as a group, I'm not sure. I mean, I'd like to know, especially if it's based on facts. Now, I'm not saying that all this is based on facts, but if in fact there's going to be a cost to the municipality,
I agree.
and they can show that, and that's the reason that they are opposing something or they're in favor of it, and I'd like to know that.
Well, I see this as two separate issues.
Yeah.
One is the
Right.
partisanship,
Is it
and then
partisan?
the other one is whether it doesn't matter if it's partisan, whether they can do it anyway.
Right.
Does it involve distribution?
Yeah.
Right.
Those are different issues.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Well, what are you calling distribution? You mean into the public domain? Because Dee just prepared, copied, and distributed this to all of us.
Oh, yeah, right, but that would be okay, right, because I would take it, that's gonna be part of,
Actively campaign or prepare, publish, broadcast, or distribute by any means.
broadcast.
I can make 6 copies of the proposed resolution and distribute it to all of you, and I've just distributed material of a partisan nature.
You're in violation code.
Well, no, but it's our, but we are exempt.
I'm on the record.
No,
Say
no,
I
no,
had done it, that was a
Get rid of it.
hypothetical.
somewhere there's an exclusion for city employees who are responding to a request by a government official. Oh, I'm serious.
I'm sure you are.
Yeah, it is. Where is it?
Terry knows the code
Yeah.
really well, right?
We just wait for him to find it. So
I just-
what are-
part
so
of it is-
Oh, it says, the limitation against dissemination of parliament materials on bond measures does not apply to municipal employees asked to assist an elected official in preparation of ballot measure or to respond to inquiries from an elected official concerning any ballot measure. I would say that falls under the second, right? That's an inquiry about a ballot measure.
You're okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just, there's something, it just strikes me as odd. I feel like we're gonna get endorsements for something. Like suddenly the assembly's gonna get in line next to the newspaper and say, oh, we endorse this, or we don't do this. And I don't really pay
But,
a
I
whole
mean,
lot of attention to
but-
that stuff.
but can't
So
they-
suddenly you're,
Right.
I mean, I understand, if it's informational, then that makes more sense to me. But that's, again, that's one issue versus another. But if I wanna be educated by my assembly, that makes sense to me. But the partisan nature part still kind of strikes me odd.
And isn't informational on things over which the assembly has some knowledge?
Yeah.
Like municipal finance.
Well, they're like an expert.
Or municipal
Right.
easements, or
Yeah.
municipal road building. It's not over marijuana.
Yeah.
So it's not informational as to marijuana.
Well, what if there's a financial impact on the municipality from?
Have they done a study?
I
I
think
don't
that's
know.
valid, but that
Yeah.
hasn't been
Yeah,
presented.
see, that's the
Yeah.
problem.
There has
There's
been
no
a
private
study
municipal.
nationwide, but of course I can't click on the link on my page here to read it, but the Alaska Association of Chiefs of Police.
But this didn't bubble up through a municipal concern.
Right.
But if we're providing advice on they're asking us for advice, right?
Yes.
So.
So whatever it is, I mean, I think you're right, it stands to reason that whatever is applied to this one, down the road,
Yeah.
same-sex marriage makes it onto the ballot, things like that. The same, we would be facing the same questions, the same issue, and so
Right.
that logic would be what we would wanna sort of lean against and go back and the question that I had in my mind was much from sort of a real 10,000 foot and maybe even a naive question is, why do these individual people want to do this? So what would be the rationale for an elected official to want to do this? This is outside the scope of any of their jurisdiction, right?
Well, looking for, now,
Because it sure does look good when fast forwarding here or to the next
election.
primary, I can stand up and say, look what I did.
Exactly.
This is how.
Yeah, that's my point.
And that's purely political motive. I mean, I can't say that, that's speculation, but, I mean,
Yeah.
if you ask the
Yeah.
why
Right,
question,
right.
why is this?
Somebody would have rejected already if it was in court, right?
I mean, you could, but the other why might be that, that you could have an official who genuinely believes, like in the marijuana thing, that it would be bad for Anchorage.
Absolutely,
Increase costs,
and
that's
that's
gonna
when
be
the information
unmanageable.
stuff would come out that we could validate, and that would be very informative to voters.
So
Anyhow.
in our
That-
response, can we, because I think this goes kind of to any issue that we bring up, not just this. I really feel if they can tie it to how it financially or otherwise impacts the municipality, then it becomes less political and less partisan.
So you're saying if it sticks to kind of our earlier decision, our earlier opinion, where we basically said so long as it stays informational,
Yeah.
then
Well,
it's okay.
But I think this doesn't give me the kind of information that you would hope you would get.
Does this?
No, but
Oh.
neither one does, really.
Okay.
Because I don't think it addresses, kind of what the impact is, really.
Like a study.
Yeah.
Like something more than just a reference to Colorado,
Right.
but some
Yeah.
kind of, this is how it affects us.
Yeah, are we gonna need more, is there gonna be a need for more police? Is there other types of
Behavioral therapists.
additional costs? I mean, if they can enumerate those types of things, I think that's informational. And whether that helps them oppose the passage or support the passage, it's immaterial. They've provided information that's relatable to what they're supposed to be doing in support of the municipality. That's the way I look at it.
Of course, now, the issue is, because I read this as more informational, the one that Dee provided to us.
Yeah.
The only thing is there's a whole lot of material behind it that I can't reach, and if we can't disseminate it, nobody else can be able to read it either.
Yeah, but it really, all this is saying is, well,
But there are links that will back
Alaska
it
will
up.
probably get tax revenue from this. So how does that impact the municipality? I don't care if the state of Alaska, I don't think we're worried about if the state of Alaska, we don't care if the assembly, that's immaterial. Does the municipality gain any revenue?
Well, if we got any revenue, then our property taxes have to go down to the tax cap.
Yeah, or does the state derive the revenue and the municipality derives all the problems that might come with it that are factually documented? To me, that's a problem. It's kind of like an unfunded mandate from the federal government.
I think one of the problems is that we don't have municipal studies probably.
Yeah.
Right, we don't have the problem yet, we don't have the study, so they don't have anything. And I don't know if you looked at the article today where they asked the Association of Mayors, well, you said this, what's your backup? I don't know. And I mean,
It's a gut
every
feel.
5 of them was, I don't know. It was like a blatant, I don't know, which of course we all knew. So they don't have an ability to really attach meaningful municipal backup for this. Whereas in, should the port be expanded? There's a ballot to expand the port. Well, isn't that appropriate for the assembly to take a position on that? Because it's a municipal issue. It directly affects our resources. This one just doesn't do that. And that's just as an aside. It just doesn't, it's not informational. I mean, we're hanging our hat on this as informational versus,
There's just not.
it's not informational,
There's
really.
just not as direct a connection
Mhm.
as the port. But I would just say anecdotally that there is going to be an impact on the municipality, whether it passes, if it passes. So, but that's just me thinking.
Yeah. Versus, are they really saying, we are your leaders, you elected us, we're good leaders, and as leaders,
Yeah,
we are thinking this isn't good.
right.
Dave, what is an administrative division? This because it talks about administrative division of municipal government.
I heard that first guy that bought marijuana in Washington State legally got fired from his job. Because
Yeah.
it was against his.
You see that? It's in
Yeah.
the 025.
We had bought it on, well, it was
C,
lunch hour,
right?
right.
Terry, I'm not sure if I know what an
probably brought
administrative
it back to the
division is,
workplace.
but I think they were,
He may
my
have been
guess is they're trying to be as inclusive as possible, that everything that looks like a department or a separate entity, that anything, we want to be as inclusive as possible in this description.
Okay.
So I'm not sure really there is an administrative division, because our government right now is broken into departments.
Right. Because that would be the one in terms of like the slippery slope of, for notice the difference between A and C in that section, right? I mean, like, C really contemplates the scenario in which you say, hey, you're not allowed to do that, even if you're not spending funds, even if just public employees are just using the resources that would normally be used by municipal employees. Whereas one, like, so whoever wrote this is like clearly mindful that there are different ways that one could think of, oh, we're not really authorizing the specific use of funds for this versus, oh, we are authorizing specific use of funds for that. But I think because the slippery slope that I would worry about is that if you uncouple and you say, hey, it's possible for the assembly not really to be authorizing and actively distributing stuff just in the normal course of its businesses and it passes the resolution, could it begin endorsing candidates, right? And that would be a heartburn for me, right? Because it's one thing to say on a ballot measure, which are usually issues, saying as your elected official, we think this is good for the city versus this is not. I would start having problems with them, endorsing candidates.
What's the difference?
Oh, it's a good question. I mean, like, the one is an issue, right? So it's a policy, it's a straight up policy question. And so it seems like your elected officials, it's both, it would be good to know what your elected officials think. And it's in their purview to make comments about that, right?
But
Whereas
the
for-
individual
for- they could do
represents
that.
the policy.
What's that?
But the individual that they endorse would represent similar policies.
Potentially, but you don't know, right? That would be really speculative. I mean, like, what policies do they actually bring to the table? People say one thing and do another.
Right.
People change their mind. Policies get renegotiated.
Well, on a
So-
broad spectrum, I mean, if you're endorsing one candidate who is conservative, then you know what policies, you have an idea what policies they're going to.
Well, you would have a vague idea about you would know their principles,
Right,
but you wouldn't necessarily know their policies, right?
but you're still affecting the outcome of an election, whether it's a ballot or a candidate.
So
Yeah,
just to put it in reality, right now, we have a conservative and then a mixed, running against each other. And if the assembly came out and said, put a resolution, said that they said, whereas, therefore we suggest you vote, for Bill Walker and, for the more balanced candidate. That would be something that we would probably, not particularly care for.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if C would prohibit that, right? I mean, like C, what's interesting about C, right? It says, C to me says to me, don't even try to do what I'm trying to do for you. Don't even think about like, well, it's not actually going to buy any special authorization of funds. At least it's going to be doing it anyway. C says, no. If Lisa's using a city computer, done. If the assembly members are sitting in city-owned chairs, done, right? I mean, like, if you're using anything that's city, that's not available to the public, but is city stuff, then you can't use any of those resources to make an endorsement. Whereas you notice E and A are more like, they don't quite have the same, they've left the door ajar for people like me.
Have they really? Because I'm looking at E, I'm still studying E. Actively campaign or prepare or publish or broadcast or distribute by any means. How can it be more broad? I don't know how that could be more broad, and I feel like you're weaving this line right in between those, and I find that I just can't. I think it's where you may want to go, but I don't know how you can get around that extremely broad definition.
Well, because, right? Remember, because
How can having
three gives an exemption to city employees when they're responding to inquiries, right? And so Dick Cheney can say to Lisa, "Hey, Lisa, I wonder what a resolution against legalization of marijuana would look like." So she draws one up. So that's covered under 3. And then they pass it at their assembly meeting.
Well, it'd be more like.
That-
an act
right?
of
That's
Julia,
it.
Wait, how does he
Right.
pass it?
How does he?
Back up.
Yeah.
How does he pass it?
Yeah.
He
What
reads it.
steps did he go through to
reads
pass it?
He
They had
reads
to have it in front of them. He had to distribute it.
Yeah.
He reads it.
I think it's telepathy.
but it's on the agenda.
He reads. He doesn't even give it to the fellow assembly. He
But
reads
I
it.
think-
to them.
Oh, okay.
He reads it to.
Then-
them.
But
He
I think
broadcasts it.
telepathy would
Oh,
fall
but
under
he-
broadcast.
but remember, no.
But he
Remember-
read it aloud, he brought.
Remember, as an elected official, he can do that. Right. What he cannot do is permit employees of the city to do that stuff. But if he doesn't ask
Can I
Lisa
ask a question?
to do it,
I think
Mr.
I
Chair.
think
Sure,
it's
be
too
my
fine.
guest.
Yeah.
I think it's
What's
too
our
fine.
expected outcome from all this? Do we have?
We have to come up with an advisory opinion,
Okay.
because we've been requested, we have official request for
So-
advisory opinion.
So can I ask a question? This goes off this topic, but kind of related. Has the assembly taken up any discussion or activity about AO 37 since it
What's
became
37?
Since-
37
labor
was
law.
the labor.
since,
law.
yeah,
since
yeah.
it became a ballot measure on the November ballot?
Not that I'm aware of.
Have
And
they,
I don't go to every meeting.
at any assembly meeting since then, have they ever even talked about it?
Are they going to try to start publishing information?
Well, I guess my point
Well, they
is,
talk- they-
it's a ballot measure now.
But they voted on it, right? Didn't they?
Yeah,
Didn't
well,
they
they-
vote to
they
repeal the
voted-
law?
they
And
had
then the
to.
mayor
Oh, he
vetoed
vetoed
that,
it,
right?
yeah.
So they've
So-
actually taken it. They haven't made a
So
resolution
they-
about the ballot
yeah,
measure, but
so
they have.
Taking a position.
They've
for
taken
it,
a
yeah.
position on a ballot measure.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
Mm.
I'm gonna file a complaint right now.
No, I mean, what's the difference?
But they're taking a
Well,
vote on the underlying
Yeah.
The-
ordinance,
yeah, on
which
a-
is
an
also
ordinance.
separately subject to a ballot measure.
And we know that the majority of the assembly opposes such ballot measure, right?
Well,
I was gonna say, but Steve,
But
they
there's
really,
nothing like this before then.
yeah, Steve,
There-
they really
this
are
isn't- yeah.
voting on the other underlying ordinance and all the stuff that, you know, back and forth on the ordinance itself.
Yeah.
And depending on how they voted, it may or may not, be, you know,
Well, I
stay
guess-
as a ballot
yeah, the
measure.
point I'm
They're
trying to make-
unsolicited offering an opinion.
So the
So unsolicited. is
Unsolicited.
okay.
I think so for the board, the bottom line, or at least for today is.
Are you frustrated, Carmen?
No.
This is how these
No,
debates
I'm-
typically
I'm
go.
steering it
She's
back,
like- she's
back
like, I
up
like
to
it when
the
that
We're so
highway.
far, yeah, we're so
Very
far off the
fast.
tracks, you can't even see the tracks
I'm
anymore.
steering it back up the train track. A request for a formal advisory opinion on whether this proposed resolution complies with the ethics code is before the board.
Is it?
So that's
Or is
really
it the
what.
revised one?
No, it's this
No.
one.
It's the first
It's
one.
this one.
Okay.
So should we make a motion
So
and
this
so we
is-
can properly discuss it?
Well, it's on the agenda, so
Oh,
we are
among others,
discussing.
does anyone know, did Dick waive confidentiality on this?
Who?
You know, I will have to determime that, but
Do you know how many bleeps I'm gonna have to
Get that
do?
recorder to smash it against the wall.
We had to have another meeting.
Let's start all over. Wow, you know, all I'm gonna say is, Dr. Kelly, this is a few meetings, and boy, I'll tell you, this teacher really falls apart.
Our meetings went much smoother when you weren't here. That issue wouldn't even have come up at a meeting if you weren't here. We would just still be talking.
But as I explained to Dr. Kelly, his perspective is, you know, he sometimes brings a contrary perspective, which opens our eyes, and it's
That's right.
not necessarily a contrarian. He does bring a different perspective.
So I would say that as written, it doesn't meet the requirements under the code
Why?
because it's partisan, political in nature.
After all that?
Yeah.
You just raise a white flag?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Oh, gee.
Why do we have to
I was
say no
having- I
more?
was having fun with it.
Yeah, we don't need to say any more, right? What else do we need to
But I'm
say?
sticking with my distribution argument, but
Are
you
you?
guys aren't buying that. And
I-
I'm okay if you guys aren't gonna, I know
Yeah,
it's,
no.
it's threading, there's no doubt about it, but.
I'm not buying it because to me it's too finely with as broad a definition as that is. That's a very fine. That's a very fine.
It's very fine.
Yeah, it's very
It's
fine. But I appreciate.
But it
the
arrives at an
perspective.
outcome that I think is reasonable, right?
Well, it arrives at the outcome that you think is reasonable. Yeah.
That distinction without a difference, Mike.
was gonna use that phrase earlier.
I know.
Love that one.
I stopped. On the issue versus person, I stopped.
But I'm okay if you guys aren't, if you guys, you know, we'll move along if you guys aren't gonna buy that, but,
Yeah, the-
that's what I'm offering, that's what I'm
So
selling today.
Yeah.
the memorandum that was provided to the board,
Mhm.
if you all are in agreement, the one I drafted, could be the basis
Mhm.
of an advisory opinion if the ultimate decision of the board
Mhm.
is in conjunction with that.
And it's.
And in the memo, I will tell you this, in the memo, in both the first paragraph and at the end, I made clear to Julia and the requesting assemblyman that, as an advisor to the board, that if you all asked my opinion, this would be the opinion I would provide you.
You know, I wonder, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No.
If we could take a 5-minute break and I got, unless you have it with you, Julia's response.
I don't have it with me, but it.
Sure, we could.
Yeah, I could.
Yeah.
Maybe that would be helpful if we take it,
So
because
some-
she spent a lot of time putting back a response.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And-
So let's, do we have to vote on that? Take a break.
Yes, you have
So
to
moved.
make a motion. Yes.
Aye.
Moved, seconded, and passed.